Hello, we're going to be getting started in a moment. Welcome to today's webinar. I hope everybody's having a great Friday. This is Dr. Bill Sodeman, and I see people stepping into the room. That's awesome. If you want to use your chat button and tell us where you are watching from, that'd be great. I am, of course, in my home studio in Toledo, Ohio, the Glass City. Hello to Matt, who's in California. Stephen, also here in Toledo. Dr. John is up in Michigan, and Lisa's in Bowling Green, just south of Toledo. Hello to Russell Thomas in Dayton. I wanted to thank everybody for joining me today for this discussion of how AI is redefining learning communities. My name is Dr. Bill Sodeman. I am a Focal Point certified business coach and also a learning and development consultant who helps organizations review their strategy and optimize their learning and development operations. And one of the ways that we're doing that is taking a look at how AI is changing learning communities from knowledge-based communities to network-based communities. Our agenda today includes that shift and a discussion of how we're redefining learning communities. We'll be talking about how AI enables something called connected learning and taking a look at a focal point four-step framework that can help us operationalize how AI can be brought into learning and development. We'll touch on some aspects of leadership and culture as we implement AI in our learning and development operations. And as always, there'll be some time for reflection and a few surprises as we go along. I do have the Q&A panel open on my side. So if anybody does have questions as we go along, please drop them in the Q&A and I will track those. I do have the chat open as well. And I'm looking forward to sharing some of this information with you as we go along on today's learning journey. And speaking of learning journeys, we've all been part of what are called knowledge-based learning communities, as long as we've been involved in classes that were scheduled, where we sat down with an instructor or a human facilitator who focused on delivering content, whether it was through a lecture, handouts, PowerPoint slides, group exercises, what have you. That scheduled training that took the form of classes, meetings, seminars, workshops, also involved mentoring opportunities, not only between the facilitator and the learners, but mentoring opportunities within that cohort or group. If you think about study groups or the ever-dreaded group project, those are good examples. The knowledge flow really depends on the personal relationships that are developed in these learning events. And for those of you who've ever been part of a small classroom, you get to know the instructor fairly well. And you've got that eyeball to eyeball contact, which is so important in group learning. In a large lecture hall, you may not have a close relationship with the instructor, but the people around you, as well as the people in your study group, well, you develop close relationships. And again, that's important for the knowledge flow. Over here, we've got a little call out for collaboration. And yes, collaboration does have something to do with this, as we've alluded to so far in the discussion. Network learning is a little bit different from knowledge-based learning. In a network learning community, we're talking about an opportunity for humans and AI to collaborate together to exchange, generate, and apply knowledge dynamically. And this is an important difference for many reasons. One of those is that the AI is going to be learning from data, behavior, and shared experience to accelerate collective growth, not only for the human learner that is in the relationship with the AI, who I often consider a sidekick or a co-pilot. The AI system is going to be learning from that human as well as learning as the human learner puts in prompts, answers questions, and goes through the learning experience. Before we had AI, when we had knowledge-based learning communities that dominated, remember that we had information transfer in real time, a top-down facilitation model with an instructor or human facilitator leading the event, and of course, periodic measurement in the form of quizzes, tests, assessments, assignments, presentations, and other opportunities for learners to show what they know. But periodic measurement doesn't necessarily measure how well a learner uses that information after the class, whether it's on the job, in their career, in subsequent workshops or classes. AI gives us that opportunity to do that through adaptive real-time learning that shifts based on the level of engagement that a human learner has, the kinds of questions that a human learner has problems with, and also the perceived strengths of that human learner. AI is also excellent in curating peer networks of other human learners. It could be employees, could be fellow students, could be supervisors, managers, and executives. But really, the foundation of all of this is continuous data-driven learning and development, which is far beyond what a human facilitator can do. AI is always on, always watching and listening. But if we set up the guardrails correctly, this is done in a good way to help us produce more dynamic learning communities through the power of the network. And just as a reminder, if you've got any questions, you can always pop them into the Q&A slot. There is a Q&A button on some Zoom implementations. It's hidden under the More button. And on some Zoom toolbars, you'll see the Q&A button pop up right there. So what do people provide in this relationship? And that's a question I always get. And there's always these fears that AI is going to replace human workers or take over more and more of human workers' tasks, leaving us to twiddle our thumbs or have to find something else to do. Well, we have a lot of responsibility as what in the AI industry is called the human in the loop. The human in the loop is responsible for monitoring the AI itself. And one way to think about that is with prompts, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail later on, setting up prompts that serve as limitations or guardrails so that the AI can understand a little bit more about the constraints of our situation. People have real world experience that AI just will never have. We interact with people every day. We learn, we tell stories, we crack jokes, we go through shared experiences. And that's an essential thing that people bring to the human and AI relationship is that we've got the experiences. Another thing that people bring in are critical thinking skills. Critical thinking skills are important not only in university education, where I've got a lot of my experience, and in life, of course, but the critical thinking skills are essential when you're scouring the output of an AI system. Um, AI is notorious for coming up with what we call hallucinations or observations or suggestions that really aren't based on facts or reality. And our critical thinking skills are important in order to sort out the truth from the not so quite the truth that AI suggests. And of course, we have an innate understanding of context as people, and we often take that for granted. Um, Russell's got a great question and an observation that most of us agree that guardrails are necessary. One of the challenges is how to effectively memory architect those standards into our AI enhanced ecosystems. And I agree with you, Russell. That is one of the challenges that AI engineers need to work on in concert with something called AI governance, which we will cover in a little more detail as we go along. Um, but thanks for the great question. That was awesome. And I'll be coming back to that one in a little bit as we reveal a little bit more about not only what do people provide, but some examples. EY has a system called an AI coach that delivers personalized module mixes, and it also recommends mentors to the learner, which is quite essential. For those of you who use Microsoft productivity software, you're probably using the SaaS-based version of it in the cloud, which Microsoft has very rigorously rebranded as Copilot. Copilot now has learning suggestions that pop up in the flow of work. So if you're using Word, for example, and you're having trouble with a specific feature like inserting page numbers into a header, you can ask Copilot for very specific help. It will pop up perhaps a training video or a step-by-step to help you complete the task. If you want some deeper learning, you can pop into Microsoft's LinkedIn Learning offering, which has a new feature called Labs. Um, Something interesting about Labs is that instead of having a cohort that doesn't change over time, you get new members of the cohort that are dynamically selected based on the skills data that Lab collects during the exercises. We're turning AI is turning data into dialogue and connecting people not by their job title, but by their purpose. And that's an important quote because one of the things that we commonly have to do in knowledge-based learning communities is sort out who gets involved in the learning. And frequently in an organization that's done by job title. In universities, it may be done by how many prerequisite courses you've had or what year you are in the program. But you may have skills in the workplace or in the university that go beyond what the current offering has, or you may need skills. So AI and LinkedIn Learning Labs is a great example of this, can remix the groups based on performance data. John's got a great question. How does EY obtain personalized information for mentoring each employee individually? Some of that is coming from the HRIS, the HR information systems that are tied into the learning management system. Some of that information is also being collected by the learning management system and the AI as the employee uses it. And this is an important point. As we see more organizations implement learning management systems and learning experience platforms or LXPs, we're going to see more connections between the learning management systems and corporate data. I'm actually working on a paper right now where my co-author and I are talking about how to tie performance data in with learning management systems in order to do some of the things that we're talking about here. But thanks for the great question, John. As I mentioned, I'm a Focal Point certified business coach, and one of the areas that we focus on is operational excellence. We have a roadmap that allows us to uncover talents, and often these talents are things that a coaching client may take for granted or just assume that they know how to do it, and there may be opportunities for improvement. And that's what we mean by refining mastery and understanding. Here's a metaphor that may be helpful. AI is a mirror for the human user. And one of the things that AI does really effectively is collect data and analyze it in real time or near real time. And it does so in a much deeper and more comprehensive way, as well as a faster way than traditional knowledge-based learning communities, where we're only taking snapshots of assessment data or measuring how long it took a learner to click through each page or click through a learning module. Something else that AI is really good to do is predicting future competencies that focus learning and development efforts. And this is something that's very hard for a knowledge-based learning community to do. But with AI, we've got access to much more data, and we can identify not only patterns in learning, but patterns in work if we connect that performance data into the AI itself. Russ is another question. Can you speak to the distinction between what people refer to as AI agents that are merely session-specific chatbots rather than AI agents that have been trained to be ongoing AI companions that remember their human companion over time? That is a great question. Many of us who have called in to, let's say, a bank or a hotel or another large service operations provider have already encountered AI agents. I'm old enough to remember when telephone trees were a new thing, and navigating a telephone tree by punching numbers into the keypad was a bit of a trial, and often I'd end up punching 0 for agent just so I could talk with a human being. The new generation of AI agents, and this is just an example on telephones, is designed to take spoken or keypad data and try to route 80% of the calls that have, basically, they're just basically simple requests, route those calls into internal systems so that a human operator doesn't need to pick up. But these AI agents often do not remember conversations with the same customer over time. Having an AI companion that does that is a more desirable thing. Takes a little bit more computing power and a lot more AI engineering to pull that off, however. Um, and I believe AI companions are where Salesforce, Microsoft, Google, and other productivity software providers are definitely moving because they want that relationship between the user and the system to grow stronger and in order to capture that user and keep them in that walled garden, if you will. But thanks for the question, Russ. That was a great one. And keep the questions and answers coming in the Q&A. I am loving this discussion so far. Um, with learning constraints, as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, I'm a big believer in Pareto's law that 80% of the work addresses 20% of time or 20% of the topics. The Pareto's law can be cut in a variety of ways. In terms of learning and development, it's important to remember that 80% of our learning barriers are internal to the organization or even to ourselves. In an organization, it could be the culture and the systems that stand in the way of learning. For example, if there's an expectation that email users respond promptly to messages, then that can really disrupt workflow. At the same time, individuals might develop habits on their own if they're not required to answer email on a regular basis. I know some people who answer email only 2 or 3 times a day, whereas other people keep their email window open all the time. And all those interruptions can add up to a significant learning barrier. And that's just one example. AI does a really good job of exposing what we call engagement drop-offs. And if you've ever sat through an online compliance training, then you may know what I'm talking about. Many online compliance trainings are just fancy collections of PowerPoint slides and videos with a few questions rolled in. They're very cost effective, they're easy to standardize, they're relatively easy for legal teams to review. And something that is important to remember in all of this is that engagement can also lead to gaps in knowledge. If learners aren't paying attention or there's something that's not clear in the presentation of the material, that can lead to knowledge gaps. There are also friction points, and there are always questions that people have during a training, but if you're watching a canned recorded training, there's no real opportunity to ask those questions. AI not only exposes those friction points, but gives us an opportunity to quiz an AI agent or an AI companion for more context. Turning data into clearer understanding by removing bottlenecks and growth is another really good thing that AI does. Again, in a knowledge-based learning community, it's very difficult for the human to interpret large amounts of data. Sorry about that. Let's go back here. Resuming where I was. But we want to remove those constraints or bottlenecks to growth, and having a deeper understanding of the patterns of learning that our human teammates go through is a really important step forward. I've taken a few pieces from focal point coaching and arranged them into a 4-step framework that can be very helpful in looking at how we implement AI in an organization's learning and development practice. Starting at the top of this diagram, we've got the clarify step. And in a previous webinar, I talked about the importance of having a personal strategic plan that defines purpose, values, and shared vision. AI can help with this by performing something called sentiment analysis and looking at different patterns to help validate that personal strategic plan and provide opportunities for improvement in that plan. Many of us are familiar with SMART goals, and the growth step involves something called the 10 goal method. When we have SMART goals, AI can not only track those goals and present them in a dashboard or prompts from a companion, it can also nudge us along to progress along with those goals. In the leverage step, we're prioritizing tasks for profitability. And as I alluded to earlier, we want to focus on the 20% of the learning that has the most impact. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And finally, the transform stage. We use a concept called zero-based thinking to identify and challenge obsolete and outdated methods and rebuild those around the efficiencies of AI. Just because we've always done things one way doesn't mean that we should change those things, especially if we have an opportunity to optimize the workflow. Lisa's got an interesting question about how do we know which of these steps we're in? And that is a great question. To be honest, that question revolves around the kind of questions that you're asking at this stage. For example, if you're asking what matters most, then you might be in the clarify stage. And pardon me, I just need to shift back here. So if you're asking what matters most, that's an opportunity for clarification. And to be honest, the clarity stage is really important, and I think of it as the dominant stage where we have to be sure about what we're doing in order to prevent wasted effort when we address the growth stage. And a question at the growth stage is how do we build capability? At the leverage stage, how do we scale what works? Remember, we're trying to prioritize for profitability, and scaling is one of those solutions. And then at the transform step, how do we redesign our systems in order to change the workflows that we've got? So thanks for that question, Lisa. That was a great opportunity to discuss that. The questions that you've got at each stage are revealing. And again, those Erica's got a great question here. Is there ever an instance where we would have to go back to a previous step before moving forward? Yes, there is. That's a great observation, Erica. And I think the reason I didn't put reverse arrows in this diagram was to make it seem a little less complicated. But that, your observation is on point. If you get to the growth stage, for example, and you realize that you don't have clarity on the organization or your personal strategic plan, then that's probably a good idea to sort that out before you address SMART goals. An even more dire circumstance is if you get to the leverage stage and you realize that you don't have clarity on your goals, or even worse, you don't have clarity on your strategic plan. So Erica, you're right. There are opportunities to iterate backwards in this model, and it's essential. So thanks for that question. Here's an example of scaling, which is part of that leverage piece that we just talked about. Suppose we have a global sales team that's using AI to form network-based learning communities using microlearnings, which we typically define as learning modules that can be completed in 5 minutes or less. They're doing it in cohorts, and they're also using performance and skill data as well as sales patterns rather than job titles. So they're doing many of the things that we've suggested so far. What we're going to hope to see is faster time to productivity. And that's from, bringing in a new hire or a transfer, from measuring from day one on the job to the day when they make their sales quota, for example. Better learner retention. And remember that in knowledge-based communities, we have these periodic assessments like tests, quizzes, assignments, group projects that provide a snapshot in time, but they don't measure how well somebody will be able to use or actually does use those skills on the job. We also want to promote higher learning satisfaction, which is crucially important. Disgruntled or dissatisfied learners tend to do a poorer job with that learning function. It's just a simple and sad fact. And if you can think about the classes that you've taken in your career, either in academics or in the workplace, try to think about a class that really excited and interested you. One thing that I reflect on from time to time is that I learned more in classes where I struggled and really had to work for the outcomes rather than the classes where everything came easy. Um, Another example that we've got an opportunity to discuss here is productivity through focus. And there's a couple of pieces I'll be giving you later on that will help with this. It's important to remember that we need to identify high-value learning tasks and assign them quickly. Difficult for a human facilitator to do. It's easier for AI to do, again, if we hook that in with performance data from the learning events as well as on the job. That data should reveal the opportunities for the highest return on investment in learning and performance. And again, my old friend Pareto's Law is here. We're trying to focus on the highest value 20% of learning that will push us forward towards earning the ROI targets that we've wanted to achieve. There's another framework that I use in focal point coaching that is very helpful, and it's called the three eyes framework. Many people see with two eyes, but professionals have three eyes. That first eye is the technician viewpoint, and a technician uses and knows tools like productivity software. An architect might have drafting tools. A marketing researcher might have databases that they use, and they might be skilled at constructing surveys. A manager not only structures systems, they help orchestrate those systems so that the people who report to the manager have opportunities to succeed. And the visionary looks forward in a strategic sense and has an important part in inspiring culture. Now, this column here in the center describes what all of this has to do with artificial intelligence. It's not important that the technician perspective understand everything about the AI system, but we need to know more about it than just the fact that the AI takes inputs, runs them through a black box, and generates outputs. And this is something we'll talk about in a little bit more detail with AI governance. Managers need to understand how AI works so that they can better integrate opportunities like agents and companions and GPTs into workflows. And the visionary has two tasks as we look ahead in time. We want to make sure that our AIs are curious. And the AIs themselves continue to learn from their human counterparts. They're in their role as co-pilots and sidekicks. We also want to have those guardrails up in place so that AI suggests actions and data that actually have grounding in the real world. We've talked a little bit about culture in this webinar, and trust is also a very important piece about culture. Um, People have to buy into an organization's viewpoint, and it's just so crucial that an organization have transparency, especially when AI is used for learning and development. Um, Users of the system, whether they're employees, and I haven't mentioned this yet, but AI is being used more and more for customer learning as well. So whether the learner is inside or outside of the organization, it does help to have some sort of explanations that are clear and easy to understand about how the AI technology is recommending that learning content to users, so that the users know it's not just a black box, that they're actually using real data and they're using it in a responsible way that respects the user's privacy. We also want to make sure that we um, honor our goals for inclusion and use the AI systems and the data to broaden opportunity, not only within the organization, but to broaden opportunity for customers if this is an external facing learning and development system as well. And finally, part of AI governance is encouraging people to provide their feedback, not only their feedback to the AI in terms of refining the prompts and the guardrails and the requests, but feedback to the organization about how well does the system work. We want AI systems that honor our organization's culture in regards to transparency, inclusion, and also safety. If you got a piece of paper handy, you can go ahead and take that out and grab a pen for a moment, or maybe you're have your phone out and you can use the notes feature on your phone, and we're just going to scribble or type in a few quick pieces here based on these questions. Think about a habit that would help you lead in AI learning. Think about a habit that you may have that will help you be a leader in using AI for employee learning. Some examples might be you're persistent, or you ask critical thinking questions. But what's a habit that you have that will help you lead as we implement network-based learning using AI? And I'll give you a few more seconds to work on that. Russell, great to have you on the call, by the way. Thanks for the questions today. Hate to see you go, but hopefully we'll get a chance to connect, Russell. Do you have a constraint within yourself or your organization where AI could be instrumental in helping you remove that constraint? Perhaps it's a habit that isn't helping you lead in AI, learning. Perhaps it's a habit that you'd like to get rid of. Perhaps your constraint is time or a lack of access to a network of peers. And for this last question, which stage needs your focus first? And just as a reminder, I'll put the four stages back up on the screen here. Which of the stages, clarify, grow, leverage, or transform, needs your focus first? And I'll pop back to the original set of questions here just for a moment as a reminder. That one habit that will help you lead in AI learning, that constraint you'd like to get rid of or overcome, and which stage, clarify, growth, grow, leverage, or transform, needs your focus first. Tish, thanks for your comment. Many people identify clarify, as I alluded to earlier, as a stage that's so important in understanding what you need to do. Having a clear strategic plan is essential. Here are some suggestions, and some of these will be available to you in the surprises I've got coming up a little bit later. One habit that can help you lead is SMART goals, specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-bound goals. In focal point methodology, we've got a technique called constraints breakthrough strategy that can be helpful here. And many people identify um, constraints around time as something that's important. Lisa's got an interesting question here. What are some of the pitfalls that organizations fall into when they're starting some of this? And are there any ways around this? One of the common pitfalls is that organizations try to transform before they clarify. And, in our sequence, our 1, 2, 3, 4 sequence, the transformation step is later in the sequence for a reason. We need clarity on our goals. We need to avoid fragmentation in the learning that we're providing. And we also, this is an important piece that I'm glad I have an opportunity to mention here. We need to make sure that the incentives we provide to employees and customers, depending on whether this is an internal facing or an external facing learning and development system, we need to make sure those incentives are aligned properly with the SMART goals and the strategic plan that we've got. Organizations that succeed have learned to slow down just long enough to clarify their purpose, constraints, and priorities, and then they can move along quickly. So if I could recommend anything, and I think I would agree with Tish's comment here in the chat, clarity first, but speed second. Once you gain clarity, then you got that opportunity to move ahead. So thanks for that question, Lisa, and thanks for that comment, Tish. That was really helpful. When we think about network-based learning communities, we can think about them in four dimensions. One is that human connection, and it's again, people with AI tend to focus on the technology and the machine more than the people. Remember that AI is just a tool at the end of the day, and we have to tell the AI what to do. We haven't hit the point of artificial general intelligence yet. or artificial superintelligence, which is probably years, if not decades off. AI requires that human in the loop. That knowledge flow happens between people in their peer learning networks that AI helps curate. But there's also that learning connection between the human user and the AI itself. As I've mentioned before, AI is really helpful in getting us real-time or near real-time access to data about patterns of usage, engagement, and the relationship between learning and performance. And as we just mentioned in our reflection exercise, clarity of purpose gives us an opportunity to align our learning and development operations so that they honor the organization's shared vision, goals, and stated purpose. Network-based learning is something really exciting, and I hope you're feeling the fever as much as I am by this point in the presentation. It's not just about replacing knowledge-based learning communities. We will always have classes and workshops. We will always have places for people to gather and learn together because it's essential and frankly, it's fun. I've been involved in adult education for over 30 years, and I simply can't imagine a day where we wouldn't have workshops and classes. But we're redefining these learning communities and augmenting them in terms of human and AI or machine-based collaboration. It's possible to spin up the flywheel faster with a network-based learning community. But it's important to have clarity, define our AI learning purpose. As we went through in that reflection exercise, identify just one constraint to remove. Don't try to break down the entire wall with one push. Try to identify one weak spot or something that really is holding you back, whether it's time management, a workflow, or something else, and try to identify that one constraint that if you remove it will have a significant effect. Now, something else that we need to watch out for is the pilot phenomenon. And many organizations are trying AI out in terms of pilots or what we call hero projects that turn into one-offs where there isn't a lot of organizational learning that happens after the project. Something's been accomplished, but it's staying in a silo. This is where AI governance becomes really helpful in assisting the organization with providing the context and the rationale for using AI. Katura's got a great question here. In her experience, trying to roll out an AI education and strategy without engaging L&D I can see where that would be difficult. Not creating a plan to ease employee concerns about job displacement due to the implementation and use of AI tools is definitely an issue. And you definitely need to not only include AI governance in this conversation, Katura, you need to include L&D governance. I've always maintained that bringing AI technology into an organization is an opportunity to free up people's time for higher value work, and that requires upskilling. It's a great upskilling opportunity for learning and development departments to tackle higher order tasks that, as we talked about with Pareto's law and the 80-20 rule, higher order tasks that may return a higher value in terms of ROI. Great question, Katura. Thank you. So we've got a few next steps as we start to ease into the tail end of this webinar, and I wanted to thank everybody here for um, being part of this. Think about how AI might deepen the connection and capability in your teams. There are opportunities to build new kinds of peer networks based on job skills, to recognize learners not only based on their performance in a class, but their performance in work-related responsibilities that are connected to the learning. And think about what you're going to take back to your organization today, this afternoon, and next week from this webinar. If there's anything valuable that you found, you'll have some opportunities here to work on that with our bonus files that we are going to distribute in email after this session. The bonus files include a learning community design worksheet. It's just a one-pager, but it asks 5 different questions about how you can set up a network-based learning community within your organization. I've also included in the bonus files a 3 eyes on AI reflection guide that will give you some more clarity on the importance of the technician, managerial, and visionary roles in implementing AI in your learning and development operations. So that'll be coming in your email. We've got some time for some questions here. I've been answering questions as we go along, but if you've got questions, now's a great time to put them in the Q&A or in the chat box. And just as a reminder, I am recording this webinar. We will have the tools available that I just mentioned in the bonus files, as well as the recording available on our landing page at n3ed.com/webinar. While you're thinking about questions, I'll also mention that every Thursday I drop a new episode of the podcast, The Perfect Route, and it focuses on HR and learning and development. So each podcast takes about 30 or 40 minutes. You can listen to it on a commute or during a workout. If you go to the landing page, n3ed.com/podcast, that will give you information. You can watch the YouTube episodes right there, or you can listen on Amazon, Apple, or Spotify. Um, Lisa's got a question here. On one of the slides, we talked about the 20/80 driver of learning. How does AI help identify the 20% of learning that drives 80% of the results? Great question, Lisa. AI can help us identify that 20% of the learning by, as long as we're connected to some operational data, production data from the actual business, we can see what pieces of learning actually move the needle in terms of results. For customer service, for example, does a learning module that's powered by AI, does that reduce the time that it takes for a human agent on a call to solve a customer problem? Um, Great question. Thank you, Lisa. And again, a reminder about the podcast here while I'm waiting for a few more questions to come through. But I wanted to thank everybody. And as a reminder, we've got another webinar coming up, and you can pull out your phone or your tablet and use this QR code to help sign up for the next webinar, which will be on Friday, January 16th, same time, noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, where we'll be talking about learning and how it's not just courses, it's all about leadership. So I look forward to seeing you at the next webinar, and I will be here if you've got questions. And of course, you can use this QR code to reach out to me as well. Thanks for attending today. I hope you have a wonderful weekend and a great holiday season, and I will talk with you again soon.